Hey guys, welcome to the channel, Rockin' the Country. I'm Don. This is a documentary. This is a 5-parter. I broke it down into 5 parts. I might break it down into 6. I'm not sure yet, but Renee Mooberry made a gift to the channel for me to do this one because like Renee and Ronnie and Ed and some others have had me do some documentaries or just, specials, if you will, on different artists, whether it's Vince Gill, Dwight Yoakam, Loretta, just general country music. And this is Portraits of an American Sound, American Country Music Documentary. It was from Netflix. I don't know when it came out, but anyway, Renee, thank you for this gift and this request. And this is going in the documentary series playlist, and that is growing. So if you want more of the history of country music or just background bits of information on artists, that documentary one is chock full of people, okay? So let's get into this one. Here we go. Portraits of an American Sound. I have not seen this.
Country music is all about real life.
There are songs that tell a story. It's a story about people.
Mama's trained and going away. That's all you got to know to write a country song.
Country is where the heart is, but country is more than music, and photography has captured it.
As the music evolved and the image evolved, photographers capture the entire story of country music.
For a long time, it was boots, hat, fancy shirts, big belt buckles.
You had the rhinestone cowboy look. They were outlandish.
The audience would go crazy about every one of them, and I was there with a camera.
We wore long gowns and this big do up here like this.
A lot of people said we are setting the image of country music back 20 years.
I didn't see what the big deal was. I say, get the camera and let's go, because I know a good picture.
Country is about being connected to something genuine. So I want to make pictures that tell you the truth.
My interest was making them reveal themselves to me.
Are these real people? What is their life really like? I want to grab that moment.
Country music has represented the heart of America for a really long time.
There's so many images that have captured where those artists are at and where country's at.
When you look at that picture and feel that same feeling, that's the shot.
Yeah. See, this is about the photographers and their pictures.
Well,
I like
I love a country style, and this little girl would walk a country mile to find her a good old slow-talking country boy. I said, a country boy, I'm about as old-fashioned as I can be, so I hope you like what you see. If you're looking at me, you're looking at country.
All these
you don't see no city when you look at me, cause the country is all I am. I love a running barefooted through the old cornfields, and I love that country hound. Well, you say I'm a man just to fit your plans, but does a barnyard shovel fit your hands?
Yeah.
If your eyes are on me, you're looking at country. If your eyes are on me, you're looking at country.
Man, there's a lot in this thing already.
Country music in its origin came from a place that's pure and uncorrupted by the rest of the world.
Early country music was a confluence of European fiddling and the banjo that came from Africa. And when these sounds converged in the American South, you get the building blocks of country music.
It was what you would hear just driving by a house out in the country. Somebody sitting on the front porch, making music to satisfy and entertain themselves.
In the 20s, they were hardcore country people. I mean, they were country people singing about country things.
It wasn't called country music for a long time. It was just folk music. as they called it, Southern folk music. And folk music wasn't considered commercial, but record labels found that once they started recording folk songs with fiddle players and country vocalists, that stuff sold really well.
Some of the first recorded country music came out of Atlanta with a guy named Fiddlin' John Carson, who sells 100,000 copies of that first record. And then in 1924, Vernon Dalhart sells 1 million copies of the Prisoner Song. And then the Carter family and Jimmy Rogers record in 1927. And that's really the beginning. That's the big bang of country music. That's when it really becomes commercial.
Jimmy Rogers and the Carter family were discovered at the Bristol sessions. It was an all-call, a discovery process where lots of musicians came in, kind of like an early American Idol, only a lot better.
Ralph Peer discovered the Carter family and Jimmy Rogers in 1 week in 1927, and all of a sudden we have country music.
The Carter family give us a body of work
it was
that's still
commercial
with us
back
today.
then.
And Jimmy Rogers becomes a superstar. He was a dandy and set the standard for the country star and influenced so many of those early country performers.
Pop Stoneman, the Gully Jumpers, Dr. Humphrey Bates, those characters lit the fire on country music, especially the Carter family. When you look at those photographs, it looked as if the Old Testament had come to life.
Radio comes into American life in the 1930s during the Great Depression, and that's when country music comes of age.
A lot of it was built around barn dances. Musicians would come from all over the region to play, and radio stations like WLS in Chicago and WSM in Nashville would broadcast it out all across the country. Radio was huge for country music.
Country music.
You know, this is so emblematic of, or just revealing of how things change. It just goes from front porch to the radio had to have been invented, then it gets on the radio, and then stores had to be out there, and then vinyl was invented, and 100,000 sells for the first guy, 1 million sells. And in 1926, when the population was so tiny in America compared to today, but then over time, you know, things change and recording techniques and all that. But then television comes out, the movies, and then there's all these outlets, and then the internet comes about. And here we are. And that's why, like, we all know things change. And the music, you know, changes, and Nashville has its own sound. I just wish the storylines had meat to them. And some of them do. Miranda's stuff, even some of the Van Perry, who they're going to get to at some point because I saw their name in this thing. I like their stuff. I like their sound. And some of their storylines are meaty. It's just I'm going to drink a beer when I get off of work. That just doesn't cut it after a while.
It was an amalgamation of regional sounds. So until there was some sort of mechanism for them to all be delivered nationally, they remained regional. But once country music becomes more widespread and you're hearing it on the radio, it's becoming more professional. And performers would go to studios and have their pictures made. They would be distributed to the radio stations. Those photographs would appear in newspapers.
They purposely would look as country as they could, if they were selling what they thought of as rural music. In the early days, guys would come in wearing a suit and a hat and change into overalls and plaid shirts in order to perform because it was part of the image.
Women were consigned to family stereotypes, so the sentimental mother and the pure mountain girl sweetheart were very prominent characters.
Well, that's what life
had prominent
was then.
roles in country music. It was family entertainment, and there were cultural expectations about who they were supposed to be.
You're selling music to a certain kind of people, a certain kind of American, and the image plays into that. Jimmy Rogers is going to wear a brakeman hat. Kitty Wells reflects that sweet country girl image. You're going to have the hillbilly look. The image is completely tied to the music.
I've always thought of hillbilly as an endearing term, but Ernest Tubb used to say, if you're going to call me hillbilly, you damn well better smile when you do it.
In the late 1930s and early 40s, you got the singing cowboys out in Hollywood with Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, Tex Ritter. And that changes the image of country music because no kid wants to grow up being a hillbilly and everybody wants to grow up being a cowboy.
The cowboy hat became this iconic image that spoke of romance, it spoke of truth, honesty, and good old American way.
Gene Autry was a huge star and a great influence on country music. not for what he sounded like, but for what he looked like, because he really popularized that Western look. And others followed Autry's path.
The cowboy look came into country music, influenced by Western culture with the boots, and some of the acts wore hats. That was around for a long period of time, and then it began to phase out, and people came into other styles and other ways of trying to present themselves.
Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs, Bill Monroe never went on stage without a coat and a tie. They looked like gentlemen and they acted like gentlemen.
In the 50s, the women wore dresses with the belt that came in at the waist and the hair that was flipping up all over the place, you know, that really classic kind of country feel.
June Carter looked so much like a lady with a chiffon dress on, and she'd do that bit where she crossed her legs and showed her pantaloons for her comedy act.
If you were a new artist, the studio was going to send you to get your photo taken by Walden Fabry. It was a rite of passage. Walden Fabry was a Chicago photographer. Minnie Pearl met him in Chicago and talked him into coming to Nashville because country artists didn't have anyone like that making these amazing glamour shots. And that's what got sent out to radio and fan magazines. And those photos were what he needed to sell the music. If you're an artist, you might go to a different photographer for different things. Elmer Williams was a photographer just having fun. He started out as an amateur. In the 50s, he started hanging out backstage in Nashville and made friends with all these country music artists. And then he started getting some work in town. He took photos for tobacco companies who were big sponsors for country artists. Philip Morris sponsored this tour with Carl Smith and Ronnie Self. And that's what they toured on. It wasn't fancy at all. Elmer Williams shot for about 10 years, and then he applied to be a policeman. And apparently it was his biggest dream because he stopped photography and never picked it back up again. And he was completely out of the country music world.
Country music in the 40s and the 50s was fighting music, dance music, drinking music, good time music.
They sang soulful songs about life, life and love, really. It was Ernest Tubb and it was Hank Williams.
Hey, hey, good looking. What you got cooking?
Hank Williams was an exciting, energetic performer, a superstar. He was only in the spotlight for a very few years. He died at 29. Yet was among the most prolific writers. He just wrote song after song, and they're classics.
I would buy his records, and I thought this guy must be so real because he's singing what he's writing, so he must feel it. This must be who he is.
Yeah.
My grandfather would say, I don't know what you mean by country. I just write songs the way I know how. He was a country boy. He's from Alabama, and these simple, basic lyrics were resonating with millions of people. This is where the roots of country was from. Simple and absolutely timeless, even down to the perfect curve of the hat, you know.
Yeah.
Country music had become the American sound and could be heard all across the country. But by the late 50s, things were changing.
Country music was in the doldrums. The big artists like Hank Snow and Ernest Tubb, their careers were on the downhill slide because there was this thing called rock and roll and rockabilly.
In my day in rock and roll, we were all in the music together, inventing it as we went along.
Yeah.
They nicknamed me Little Miss Dynamite. And the music was very rhythmic, a little bit of gospel, a little bit of blues, a little bit of country.
Country music was such a big influence of what became rock and roll, but in a way, rock and roll left country behind through its energy and through its youth and through its images.
Wow.
Elvis Presley thought of himself as a country singer. He just happened to be a really fast, energetic one.
I appeared with Elvis December the 13th, 1957. He was just getting started. The great success was yet to come, even though he was really, really popular.
All right, I'm gonna stop this one there. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna break this down into at least 6 parts. There's so much in this to take in. I want to stop it every time they show a picture or make a comment. But obviously things changed. Then you bring in rockabilly. This is really well done. These images are fascinating to me, and the way things morphed and grew. I love learning. I listen to seminars in my car a lot. Philosophy, physics, English, history, probability theory, like neuroscience. Like I listen to a lot of seminars. This is just as fascinating to me. Learning about the history, because the social setting of things just always fascinates me, how things relate to other things, seeing how culture grows, because most of us are a product of culture, and you can look back and see one particular aspect of a culture, or look in contemporary times and look at one aspect of a culture and say, oh, look how backwards they are or were or whatever. But it's like, no, people are set in a culture. You've got to understand the time in which things are set to understand why things were done that way. For example, I love the comment about Hank Williams Sr.'s perfect curve of his hat. And you're like, you're right. I never even thought about that. But that was part of the culture. I might make it part of my culture now when I get my Stetson back on set. But anyway, that's part one, folks. I'm not sure how many are going to be on this one. Depends on how much I talk in the middle of them. I try not to interrupt them that much because it's so riveting. So we could thank Renee Mooberry for this yet again. All right, guys, have a wonderful day. I'll see you on another video, and keep rocking the country.
It was what you would hear just driving by a house out in the country. Somebody sitting on the front porch making music to satisfy and entertaining themselves.